Hello, welcome to the Mirror's pre-Ashes Vodcast with me, Dean Wilsoon, the Daily Mirror cricket correspondent. Over the next little while, we're going to be talking through the upcoming winter, the exciting challenges ahead for England as they go down under to try and retain the Ashes for the first time since 1986-7. Joining me to talk through these issues are going to be the Daily Mirror's chief sports writer, Oliver Holt, the former Daily Mirror cricket correspondent and all-round Ashes legend, Mike Walters, and our token Aussie and Mirror news hound, Martin Newman. First of all, if I can start with you, Ollie, you're the chief sports writer. You're used to covering huge events all around the world. You're going to be joining me in Australia this winter. What is it about the Ashes that makes it such a great event?
I think it's partly the history, Dean. I mean, any event, any sporting contest that has a rich history, every time you cover or you attend, you spectate at the next episode in that history, it feels special. And so when you go and watch when we go to the first Test match in Brisbane this time, there's so much so many backstories there. You're going to be thinking, even in the recent past, about Nasser Hussain putting the Aussies in 2 Ashes series ago in Australia. Then we're going to be thinking about Steve Harmison's, first ball wide. All those recent bad memories that we have, and they, I want to go back, Bodyline, everything, all the great stories that there are. It's part of a great kind of narrative, the Ashes, and it's as you know. It's a brilliant event to cover. I mean, it's probably, again, I'd have to defer to you two guys, but it's got to be the best rivalry in cricket. It's a magical thing to cover either here in England or in Australia, and it's something that I'm looking forward to immensely.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a very special event. You mentioned Nasser Hussain putting England into bat in 2002-3. One of the men watching that incredible decision was Mike. Could you believe it when he made that decision? And what was it like being out there watching England kind of come unstuck?
It was a real pass the cyanide moment, wasn't it? Nobody could believe the decision. Australia were 364 for 2 at close of play on that particular day. I think England spilled 4 very catchable catches as well during the day to make it even worse. And of course, to top it all, Simon Jones came a cropper in the outfield, trying to make a sliding stop near the boundary and ruptured his knee ligaments, was out of cricket for, nominally for 9 months, but effectively it took him 18 months to come back again. So England have very bad memories of the first Test of 2002. They have very bad memories of the first Test in 2006 when Harmy's loosener went to a rather startled Freddie Flintoff at second slip. They have very bad memories of the first Test in 1994 when De Freitas bowled to Michael Slater and it was carved to backward point for the first ball of the match. 4 runs, thank you very much indeed. Australia on top. They have very bad memories of 1990 under Graham Gooch when poor old Goochie compared the series to a fart competing with thunder. And we have to go back to Christmas week 1987 for England to sort of hold the bragging rights in any shape or form in Australia, because that was the last time England won a Test match when the Ashes were still at stake.
It's not been a great history for England in the recent past, I suppose. I should bring the gloating Aussie in on at this stage. Things have been going well for Australia in Ashes series at home, and that's what you expect to continue, is it?
Well, they have so far, and things have been going well in the Ashes generally up until three Ashes ago when it was wrested back off, and that was a very close season, a very close series. Some of those games could have gone either way. So I think when that happened, it was a great win for England. But back home in Australia, there was a feeling that things would revert back to the way they had been. And indeed, the next series we won in a whitewash, and I think England came over feeling, I don't know what they were feeling. I think they came over looking for a holiday almost, and didn't think they were going to win, and so it ended up being they ended up being rolled. But
we don't talk about that series.
No,
it wasn't erased that from the history.
It wasn't good, but I think things have changed a bit. I mean, having won the next one and having a more confident side, more confident in their ability to win, I think they're going to go over with more confidence than they did last time. And also, it's been a huge topic of debate in Australia, the team at the moment, because our batsmen and our bowlers are both not performing as well as they used to.
I mean, you've been in the UK now for some time, but can you give us a little insight as a lad growing up in Australia, when England used to come over and tour, and what the level of excitement's like for the Australian public when they're out there? Are they just chomping at the bit, waiting to get stuck into the Poms?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the thing we want to do most is really whip England, and you know, it means a lot to beat England. You know, obviously we want. We want a competitive series, and there are always players that come over from England who are embraced as being, you know, the admirable player. I mean, both of them was hugely admired, and I think Flintoff was admired greatly as well. You know, there are certain characters that captured the imagination of people. I think even Monty Panesar was very well liked in Australia as a character. So there is all that. But when it comes down to it, you still want to win, regardless of, you know, how well you regard the team that you're playing against. So, and there have been some great performances over the years. I mean, Gower was incredible in the Ashes when he came to Australia, and Chris Broad had an incredible series there, and you know, more recently Michael Vaughan had a fantastic, you know, set of big tons in Australia. So. There's a lot of pride on the line, and I think losing in Australia is something that would you know, people don't want to contemplate and haven't had to for a while. So it's going to be, we're looking at two sides that are a lot closer than they have been.
It's also something that would be a terrible blow for Ponting, isn't it? If we won in Australia, it would really kind of, you know, one of the world's greatest players. It would be an incredible sort of terrible stain on his record, wouldn't it? Having lost twice in England as well. Wouldn't it put him down as the worst? Would it put him down as the worst Aussie Ashes captain in terms of purely in terms
losing
of
three
results?
series,
Yeah.
I believe so. I think you've got to separate Ponting the captain with Ponting the batsman. To be fair. Ponting as a captain was lucky to have McGrath, Warne, Gilchrist, Hayden, Langer at his disposal for much of his reign as captain. It's significant perhaps in the 6 Test matches since 1993 where England have not had to face Warne and McGrath in the same Australian team. England have won 3 of the 6 matches and only lost once. And I think if you take 1,200 Test wickets out of Australia in Warne and McGrath, that's probably ultimately been the major difference between Australia and not only England but Australia and every other team on the planet.
Well, you know what? Because I was thinking back to the last series in Australia, and particularly the second Test in Adelaide, when I think Paul, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Paul Collingwood score a double century? I remember being at that game and thinking we were in an incredibly strong position, and then we were just kind of mesmerised by Warne on the final day, weren't we? And you know, skittled out. And I know Mike will talk about this and feels that the Aussies maybe have the edge, but I just think that the loss of Warne, there's nobody who's going to do that to us anymore, is there? You know, we're not a worse side than we were then, probably. There's nobody that's going to do that to us anymore. There's nobody that's got that. You know, Nathan Horrocks hasn't got that kind of psychological hold over us, or the brilliance that Warne had, which I think must give us a lot of optimism going out there.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the entire Australian side, if England sort of go man against them, they'll probably feel they could come out on top. The recent Australian vintage, the great players that Mike mentioned, the Warnes, McGraths, Haydens, Langers, Gilchrist, you know, they all had a hold over England. You know, when Adam Gilchrist walked to the crease, they could be 50 for 5, and all of a sudden they're 250 for 5. You know, he had that kind of ability, and it worried the England players. I don't think Australia have a single cricketer in their side anymore that puts that kind of fear or worry into England players. As great a player as Ricky Ponting is, and there's no question there, I think people are wondering whether or not is he as good as he used to be? Is he having back problems? Has his eyes gone? Is he worried about the captaincy? Is he worried about the quality of his side? He's got a lot of things to deal with. So in terms of his the fear factor, I don't think it's there anymore. I would suggest that the Australians are going to be more worried about what England have to offer in terms of Graham Swan, Stuart Broad, Andrew Strauss, who are all players that have performed incredibly well against Australia. I think Australia are the ones who should be worried.
Well, I think we are worried. I think, you know, the press press in Australia have shown that there's a lot of concern about both the batting and the bowling. And you're quite right, we haven't been able to replace McGrath and Warne. It's difficult. I mean, great bowling combinations don't come along very often, and each international team has them every now and then. We've had a good run. We had a good run with Warne and McGrath, but I mean, our bowling lineup at the moment, we're probably looking at Hilfenhaus and Johnson opening the bowling. Now, 6 years ago, they would probably have been our change bowlers, and we'd have McGrath and Lee. We'd have Warne to come on. Lee is now past his best. I mean, he may still play, but it's probably likely that you're looking at Hilfenhaus and Johnson, and then you have some of the other guys who will come into it, like Bollinger and possibly Siddle, and Horitz, who has not set the world on fire recently. He's been a containment bowler rather than a wicket-taking bowler.
Well, I know that Mike has his theories about the Australian bowlers and the Australian players. These guys, Hilfenhaus, Johnson, Bollinger, Horitz, they may not have impressed too much in India recently or in England last year, but they are going to be playing in their own backyard. Does that make a difference?
On home soil, it does make a difference, and I think rather than look at the two sets of bowling attacks, I'm more inclined to look at the two top sixes, and I have to say, regrettably, that I fear England's top six is more collapsible on a regular basis, as we saw against Pakistan at home last summer, than Australia's top six is. It is a fact, it's an extraordinary fact, that in the Ashes in 2009, when England won, Australia outscored England was it 8 centuries to 2 or 3 in the series, and Australia's average wicket cost 34 runs and England's average wicket cost 26 runs. I don't think there's ever been such a disparity in statistics like that before, where the team with the lower set of stats has come out on top. And I just think that England's top six, Strauss, fine player, good record against Australia, no problems. Alistair Cook averages 26 against Australia. Jonathan Trott's a good player, but he's going to have people carping from under the lid and in the twittering aviary from the slip cordon about his accent, shall we say?
His lineage.
His lineage. Yeah. Kevin Peterson, ditto. Paul Collingwood, score of a double hundred, but couldn't get by a run at the back end of the English summer, so he's going to have to reboot. And then do we play Bell or Morgan at 6? Bell didn't have a great time, didn't set the world alight in Australia last time and averaged about 25, I think, in the series in 2005 when we did win. I'm more concerned about England's top six than the actual bowling attack per se.
Well, Peterson, actually, I was just going to... Peterson's a massive issue, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, my kind of instinct, just as somebody almost from the outside, not a cricketing connoisseur like you two, is that it's just an instinct that Peterson will come good. But I know that is only based on his kind of reputation. I know the troubles he's been having, but I just feel that he's a big, he is a big game player who will be desperate to come good in Australia. But I suppose there have been precious few signs of that actually happening in reality, haven't there?
No test hundreds for 18 months on Peterson.
I think the Peterson issue is an interesting one. I think you're right, actually. I think he will come good, and for sound reason. I think, the reason he hasn't scored 100 for 18 months is because he had a horrific Achilles injury that initially they thought had sorted. They sorted it out and didn't, and I think that really scarred him both literally and psychologically. I think also as well as he played in the World 2020. And as much fun as 2020 cricket is, I think that actually plays a bit of havoc with your game when it comes to getting your head down, playing long test match innings, and I think KP perhaps lost his way a little bit there, enjoying the success of 2020 cricket and not remembering how to structure test match innings. I think he is, though, a quality player. I think if you look at the batting throughout the English summer, the ball nipped and seamed and swung around, and whatever anybody says about the Pakistan bowling attack and their preference for no balls, they are impressive bowlers. And Mohamed Asif and Mohamed Amir had everyone's number this summer. I think that when you get to Australia on flatter pitches, or certainly pitches where the ball doesn't deviate as much off the seam or in the air, I think KP can get his front pad out in front, and he likes to stretch out and get a big stride in and play the ball out there. I think he'll be able to trust the ball a lot more, and I think he will play with more confidence. And like you said, he is a big game player. He's desperate to do well, and I think people have been questioning whether KP is just a good Test cricketer with the occasional great innings, or is he going to be a great Test cricketer of the calibre of the likes of Richards and Lara and Ponting? He may not quite get there, but I think this series will say whether or not he's a great cricketer, and he wants to be a great cricketer. I think that's
Well, there's certain
what he'll
things
show.
in his favour down there as well. I think in Australia that he's regarded as a bit of a game breaker, can be a game breaker, and not a lot of players are regarded in that way. And so he'll have a lot of attention for that reason. There'll be a lot of press interest in him. He will be the focus of a lot of what's said about the England team, and that may work in his favour because he loves the limelight, and that could suit him. But the other thing is, it's very much a mind game, the Ashes, and every time there's a division in the England team, and quite often it's been about Kevin because he's liked by some. He's a bit of a buffhead, Kevin, and he puts some people off, and other people think he should always be in the side. But whatever happens, those divisions help the Australian side, and so whenever we see that, we feel that we're getting on top of the mind game, and you can usually see early in an Ashes series which way it's going, who's winning the mind games, and you can see by the performance of the players and how the team runs. So I mean that could have an effect.
Do you think that that's a fair comment in the sense that you've got an England team now with quite a lot of experience, players who've been to Australia before? Admittedly, it wasn't the greatest experience, but do you think that Australia have got the edge in the mind games department?
Well, nobody does it better than Australia. What a lot of people don't realise is that the moment you step off the plane in Perth, you're in the spotlight, and the moment England step off the plane in Perth, they'll be ambushed with questions about those players who have been to Australia before and lost. They'll be told you're mentally scarred, you've been there, you know what's coming. And those players who've not been to Australia before will say, look out, you don't know what's coming, you've never been to Australia before. So England lose both ways. Going back to Kevin Peterson, I have a theory about Peterson in that when I watch him bat now, I don't think I'm watching the same player who burst into the England team in 2005. When's the last time we saw the flamingo on drive, the one he plays off one leg? When's the last time we saw him slap a fast bowler Babe Ruth style straight back down the ground? He seems to have put away some of his more effective, if unconventional, shots in favour of the textbook. And I'd rather he just stands there and hits the ball and whacks it than trying to be almost too correct.
He's got a great eye, hasn't he? He's got one of the best eyes in
fabulous
cricket.
eye.
Why do you think those shots have been put back into the locker? Is it because he has become more circumspect with age? Is he trying to please too many people? Is he frightened of criticism of when he gets out in those manners? Why do you think
it's possibly a little bit of each of those, Dino? I think he's trying to be conformist, shall we say, rather than the non-conformist, exceptional individual player that he was. Of course, he's become captain and come out the other side pretty rapidly afterwards. And with captaincy comes a certain responsibility. And again, he may not have wanted to be seen to get out to any irresponsible strokes in the brief time he led the team. And of course, there was the injury as well. Perhaps that Achilles injury did actually hamper his ability to play some of his more exceptional shots. But don't forget, we're talking about a player who's 3 times, I think, been dismissed in the 90s, going for a big 6 to bring up his 100. I like that kind of player. I think there's a lot to be said for the 6 and out brigade. It's what we played in the back garden.
Obviously, Kevin, big name player, one of England's star men. I just want to, Ollie, ask you about another star man, Graham Swan, who has taken the bowling world by storm since coming into the side. He's ranked number 2 in the world. He seems to be a bit of a character himself. He clearly enjoys what he does, and he gives the ball a big rip, and he seems to be a bit of an entertainer.
Yeah.
Are you impressed by what he's done so far? Are you looking forward to watching him?
Yeah, incredibly impressed. And actually, I think he'll be very, very important, as much for his personality as for his ability. And going back to what Mike was saying about when they get off the plane, it strikes me that Swan is not the type who, particularly with the achievements he has under his belt now, and with his personality, is not the type who will be intimidated in Australia, and is actually the type who, like Peterson, may actually thrive on that kind of attention, on some of the the old-fashioned banter that they may get out there. I think Swan will thrive on that. He won't shrink, I don't think. And I think, again, going back to those memories I have of Adelaide, which was sort of the last time we were there, which just encapsulated the kind of hold that Warne had over us. I think the closest thing there is going to be to Warne in this series is Graham Swan. Probably he's the best bowler probably in both teams, and I think because of that he'll be absolutely crucial.
Do you think the Australian public will warm to Graham Swan, or will he be a crowd favourite? Or
well, it's difficult to tell how it's going to go, but usually, I mean, if he's taking wickets, if he has an effect on the match, then people will admire him. I think he's admired already. I mean, he's obviously had a great couple of years, and he's one of the premier spin bowlers around at the moment. So I think he'll be one of the main men for England and Australia. I'd like to see how Morgan goes. I think Morgan he could cement his place for a while if he has a good run over there. So there will be a lot of interest in those players and a few others, and see how some of the younger guys come on. Someone like Stuart Broad, he may cement his position with a good series over there as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Owen Morgan, of course. Ricky Ponting suggested that Owen Morgan may start the Ashes series. I mean, he played the full summer of Test cricket after Ian Bell, initially after they rested Paul Collingwood, and then Ian Bell's injury left him out of the Pakistan series. Do you see it as a straight selection decision between Owen Morgan and Ian Bell, or do you think the likes of Collingwood or even Peterson, are they all under the microscope going into Brisbane?
I think they're under the microscope, but I'm bust digits and hamstrings going twang notwithstanding. I think it's probably a straight fight between Bell and Morgan, and my gut feeling is that England will go with Bell at number 6, where he scored a few hundreds for England before, because of his past experience against Australia, because Morgan's best innings, with one obvious exception at Trent Bridge against Pakistan this last summer, Morgan's best innings for England have mainly come in one-day cricket, and I think at the moment that they look upon Morgan as a player of huge promise, but still perhaps a work in progress, whereas if we're going to get the best out of Bell, it's now or never. So I think he'll start at number 6.
What about the Australians, Ollie? I don't know if you caught up with much of what happened in India. They lost 2 Test matches to India. They may have some selection problems of their own.
Yeah, I mean, I looked down their lineup. I did follow what happened to them in India, and obviously against the general backdrop of the idea that they are on the slide, they're not the dominant force that they were. And you look down their team, and again going back to what Mike was saying about his concerns about the top 6. I mean, you look at the Aussie team, and it's still fairly formidable batting lineup, and to me it looks like that the issue will be is whether they can knock us over more than whether they're going to make runs. And I guess that's backed up by India. Got some big scores, didn't they, in India? I mean, the Aussies found it hard to knock them over, and I suspect that may be one of the crucial elements in Australia, whether their bowling lineup, which looks significantly weakened to the great lineups that they used to have, whether they can, whether they will hold any fears at all for our batsmen.
England have picked a squad full of big fast bowlers. There's Stuart Broad, Steve Finn and Chris Tremlett all coming in over 6'7" and sending the ball down from an even greater height. Is that a smart option going to Australia? Do you think the bouncy pitches out there is going to cause a bit of havoc?
Yeah, well, I know some pitches more than others. I think having Swan there, they give themselves, you have an option. You have options there, which is good. It's always good to have a few decent fast bowlers, especially when they're performing. Certainly, I think we'll be playing a lot of pace men. I mean, I think with both the selection committees, they're usually fairly conservative, and it's the established players. I think Australia are going to have pretty much the same sort of team we saw in India, and it could come down to a battle of who gets through with the pace men, and certainly guys like Finn. I think Finn is coming along quite well. We've got a few younger players that are coming through over there, like Stark, and some of them may get a run. Although I fear that the selectors will probably are on the side of caution. So it'll be a matter of whether those established players can do the job. I think the pressure will be on them enormously. Pressure will be on Ponting. People are calling for him to step down as captain and saying it's affecting his batting, which is a nice way of giving him an option to step down without saying he's not captaining very well. The pressure's on Ponting, the pressure's on the bats, guys like Mike Hussey, who need to score, Michael Clark, who we all expect to be there till he retires, and the Australian team has not been scoring as well as he should. I think our openers have been pretty solid. Ponting is still good for runs, but then, we have some underperformers, so it'll be very interesting.
I think going back to what we were saying earlier about the kind of the joy of the Ashes, part of it has always been watching the Australians as well, because again, particularly recently, they've always had fantastic characters, and I think they, particularly among the batsmen, they've still got those characters. The players that Martin's just mentioned, Clark, Hussey, Ponting, they're all they're all guys that you want to like, basically. I think in terms of their characters, Shane Watson as well, and I think those guys are going to have to come up big, basically, in this series. I think those kind of characters are going to have to really stand up.
We talk a lot about the pressure on Ricky Ponting, Australia's captain. Andrew Strauss is England's man out in the middle. He's played his part in 3 Ashes series now. He knows what it's all about. Do you think this will be his crowning achievement as England captain down under this winter?
If he wins the series, undoubtedly. If he wins the series, there's not many England captains have won an Ashes series at home and away. He's got a group of players around him he trusts. He's got good instincts, Strauss. And don't forget, 4 years ago, he only missed out on the captaincy by a whisker. It was almost a toss-up between him and Flintoff. And the selectors only gave it to Flintoff, I think, because they'd promised it to him earlier in that summer, just before he was seriously injured and had to go and have one of his ankle operations. And Strauss took over, beat Pakistan 3-0, and was the man in possession, and was a bit unlucky not to go as captain. So,
was generally viewed as a mistake as well, wasn't it? I mean, particularly in hindsight, I suppose. But
I think England would have been I think England would have been steamrolled by Australia that winter, no matter who was in charge. I think it was, again, to use Graham Gooch's phrase, a fart competing with thunder. I think they were so hell bent on revenge for England winning the Ashes in 2005 that nothing was going to stop them that time. So I'm not sure that Strauss could have made a difference, but I think it will be motivation for him this time, that this is the series where he should have been captain, so let's see what he can do now. And it would undoubtedly be his crowning glory. It'll be a rise, Sir Andrew Strauss, I'd imagine, if he comes home, if he comes home with the urn.
I think gongs all round for those who missed out last time.
I think Australia will have the added incentive as well. They've just slipped below England in the world rankings, which hasn't been the case for a long time.
First time ever that England
think if we win the series, we'll hopefully be elevated back above. But that's another sore point.
Well, we live in hope, because Australia have been knocked out of the last 2 Rugby World Cups by Johnny Wilkinson. Australia finished below Great Britain in the Olympic medals table, so we're now looking to complete the Grand Slam and finish above you in the ICC Test.
Yeah, we did get the Commonwealth Games over you.
It's because Great Britain was splintered into about 4 different countries.
We were being friendly. They are the friendly games after all. My favourite part of things like this, I've got to ask you for your predictions. I'm going to start with you, Martin, the Aussie in the camp.
I think Australia with the pressure on them, they still have the players to win it. I think they can win the series, but I think it'll be close. I don't think it's going to be a whitewash. I think it could even be a drawn series, but I think Australia can win at least 2 matches, and it's a matter of whether or not they can win with that many. I think England are certainly going to win a match or 2, and it'll be a matter of who comes out best in the rubber.
Ollie?
Well, I think it's going to be a real ding-dong series. I think it's going to be a terrific series, because I think we're quite evenly matched. I think we're probably a better side, but obviously the Aussies have got home advantage, so I think it's going to be an absolute cracker. And I'm going to go for 2-1 to England.
And Mike?
2 provisos. Number 1, England must, to have a chance, England must win one of the first 2 test matches. There's no point in doing what they did 4 years ago, going 2-0 down and harbouring hopes of coming back to win 3-2. Nobody goes 2-0 down in Australia and comes back to win 3-2 unless it's Roy the Rovers. So England must win one of the first 2 test matches, and they must put 400 plus on the board in the first innings every time without exception. And if they do that, they've got a great chance, but I fear our collapsible top 6 will let us down once too often, and I fancy 2-1 Australia.
2 Australia. Oh, for the record, I think that England have their best chance in a generation of winning out there. I think that they need to come away with something from Brisbane. The first test, I think, has just been a horror show over the last 4 series down under. And if you gave Andy Flower and Andy Strauss a draw right here, right now, they'd bite your hand off for it. So I'm not saying go and play for the draw, but they've got to come away with something from Brisbane. And if they do that, then I think they'll win the series. I think it'll be tight. Yeah, it will be a roller coaster ride, if you will. But I think England will come out on top, 2-1 to the tourists. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Mike Walters, Martin Newman and Oliver Holt. From me, Dean Wilson, hope you will follow the Ashes online with themirror.co.uk and in the paper, the Daily Mirror and Sunday Mirror, from all good news agents. And we'll be following the action from the first test in Brisbane on November 25th.